Sarah Martinez walked through the automatic doors of the luxury cruise ship terminal, her worn sneakers squeaking against the polished marble floor. She clutched a small backpack containing everything she owned and a folded piece of paper with her cabin assignment. The terminal buzzed with wealthy passengers dragging designer luggage, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings as they discussed their expensive vacation plans. She had won this cruise in a radio contest 3 months ago, calling in during her lunch break from the diner where she worked double shifts to pay for her night school classes. The prize included a 7-day Caribbean cruise with all meals and activities included. It was the first vacation she had taken in 5 years and, honestly, the first real break she could remember since her husband died in Afghanistan. The other passengers barely glanced at her as she made her way to the check-in counter. Her simple jeans and faded t-shirt stood out sharply against the sea of expensive resort wear and jewelry that sparkled under the terminal lights. When she reached the counter, the desk clerk looked her up and down with barely concealed disdain. "Name?" the woman asked, her voice clipped and professional but lacking any warmth. "Sarah Martinez," she replied quietly, handing over her confirmation paperwork. The clerk typed slowly, frowning at her computer screen. "I don't see a Sarah Martinez in our guest list for this sailing." Sarah's heart sank. She pulled out her phone and showed the woman the confirmation email. "I have it right here. Cabin 4127. After several minutes of typing and phone calls, the clerk finally found her reservation. "Oh, you're the contest winner," she said, as if that explained everything unpleasant about the situation. "Your cabin is on deck 4. Take the elevator down 3 levels from the main boarding area." Sarah thanked her and made her way toward the ship, following the flow of passengers across the gangway. The ship was massive, gleaming white against the blue sky with multiple decks stretching up like a floating city. She had never seen anything so grand in her life. Once aboard, she tried to follow the signs to her deck, but the ship's layout was confusing. She found herself wandering through elegant lounges and restaurants, past shops selling watches that cost more than she made in 6 months. Other passengers moved around her with purpose, already familiar with luxury travel, while she felt increasingly lost and out of place. "Excuse me," she said to a couple studying a map near the main atrium. "Could you help me find deck 4? The woman looked at her with surprise, then whispered something to her husband. "Deck 4? Are you sure? That's where the staff quarters are." "No, I'm a passenger. Cabin 4127, the man laughed. "Those are interior cabins, dear. No windows, tiny rooms. Are you traveling alone?" When Sarah nodded, the woman shook her head sympathetically. "Well, I suppose not everyone can afford a proper stateroom. The staff elevator is over there." She pointed dismissively toward a narrow corridor. Sarah found her way to deck 4, which was noticeably different from the elegant public areas above. The carpeting was simpler, the lighting dimmer, and the hallways narrower. Her cabin was indeed small, with bunk beds and barely enough room to open her backpack. But it was clean, and it was hers for the next week. That evening, she dressed in her best outfit, a simple black dress she had bought from a thrift store, and made her way to the main dining room for dinner. The maitre d' looked at her reservation and seemed confused. "Dining room seating for contest winners is typically in the buffet area," he said. "My confirmation says I have access to all ship amenities." Sarah replied politely, showing him her paperwork. Reluctantly, he seated her at a small table near the kitchen doors, far from the elegant tables with ocean views. The other diners at nearby tables glanced at her curiously, clearly wondering how someone like her had ended up in their exclusive dining room. During dinner, she overheard conversations at the neighboring tables about business deals worth millions, vacation homes in the Hamptons, and children attending prestigious private schools. She ate quietly, trying to enjoy the delicious food while feeling increasingly isolated. After dinner, she explored the ship's public areas, amazed by the theater, the casino, and the multiple bars and lounges. In the main lounge, a jazz band was playing and couples danced on a small dance floor. She found a seat at the bar and ordered a soda, watching the elegant scene unfold before her. "First time on a cruise?" asked the man sitting next to her. He was well-dressed, probably in his 50s, with an expensive watch and the confident air of someone accustomed to luxury. "Yes," Sarah replied. "It's incredible. Where are you traveling from?" "Phoenix. I work at a diner there." His expression changed subtly. "A diner? How interesting. And you're traveling alone?" When she nodded, he seemed to lose interest quickly. turning back to his drink and the business colleague he had been talking with before. Sarah heard him murmur something about different types of people on these cruises now. Later that night, as she lay in her narrow bunk listening to the sound of the ship's engines, Sarah reflected on the day. She had expected some awkwardness. She knew she didn't belong in this world of wealth and privilege, but she hadn't anticipated feeling quite so invisible, so judged by her appearance and background. She thought about her late husband, Miguel, who had always encouraged her to be proud of who she was regardless of what others thought. He had believed that real worth came from character, not from bank accounts or designer clothes. She decided that she would make the most of this week, regardless of how others treated her. Tomorrow would be their first port of call in Cozumel, and she was determined to enjoy every moment of this once-in-a-lifetime experience. She had worked hard for everything in her life, and she deserved to be here just as much as anyone else, even if they couldn't see it yet. The next morning, Sarah woke early and made her way to the buffet for breakfast. The dining area was less formal than the main restaurant, but she still felt the subtle stares and whispered comments from other passengers. She chose a table by the window and watched as the ship approached the colorful port of Cozumel. Mexico at a nearby table, she couldn't help but overhear a group of women discussing their shore excursion plans. They were all wearing expensive resort wear and large designer sunglasses despite being indoors. "I booked us the private yacht tour," one woman announced proudly. It was $800 per person, but Charles said money was no object for our anniversary trip. "Wonderful, Patricia," another woman replied. "We're doing the helicopter tour of the ruins. Only the best guides, of course." The third woman in the group noticed Sarah listening and looked her up and down with obvious disdain. "I hope they're screening the shore excursions better these days. Last cruise, we had some very questionable people on our tour who clearly didn't belong." Patricia followed her friend's gaze to Sarah. "Oh, I'm sure she's doing one of those budget bus tours. They pack them in like sardines and take them to all the tourist traps." Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she kept eating her breakfast and looking out at the beautiful Caribbean water. She had indeed booked a budget tour, a visit to some Mayan ruins and a local market, because it was all she could afford beyond the cruise itself. When the ship docked, Sarah joined the line for her tour group near the gangway. She found herself surrounded by other passengers who seemed more like her. Families with children, older couples counting their spending money carefully, and solo travelers with modest luggage. The tour guide, a friendly Mexican man named Carlos, welcomed them warmly. "Buenos dias, everyone. I am so excited to show you the beautiful history and culture of our island today." As their bus pulled away from the port, Sarah saw Patricia and her friends boarding a luxury van with leather seats and air conditioning. Patricia caught sight of Sarah through the bus window and smirked, saying something to her companions that made them all laugh. But as the day progressed, Sarah found herself having a wonderful time. Carlos was knowledgeable and passionate about Mayan history, and the ruins they visited were breathtaking. She took photos with a small disposable camera she had brought, marveling at the ancient pyramids and intricate stone carvings. At the local market, she practiced her high school Spanish with the vendors, who were delighted by her genuine interest in their crafts and culture. She bought a small, hand-painted ceramic bowl for her apartment back home, carefully counting out her dollars to make sure she stayed within her tight budget. During lunch at a local restaurant, she sat with a retired schoolteacher from Ohio and a young couple from Canada who were on their honeymoon. They shared stories and laughed together. And for the first time since boarding the ship, Sarah felt like she belonged somewhere. "You speak Spanish really well," the bride, Jennifer, commented as Sarah translated the menu for their table. "I took it in high school and picked up more working at the diner. We have a lot of Spanish-speaking customers," Sarah explained. "That's so useful," the retired teacher, Mrs. Patterson, said. "I always regretted not learning a second language." "Where did you go to high school?" Sarah hesitated, knowing her answer would reveal more about her background. "Roosevelt High in Phoenix." "It's not. It's in a working-class neighborhood. Some of the best schools are," Mrs. Patterson replied kindly. "I taught in public schools my whole career." The students who worked hardest often came from families that understood the value of education. When they returned to the ship that afternoon, Sarah felt refreshed and happy. The day had reminded her that there were good, unpretentious people in the world, even on a luxury cruise. She decided to spend some time by the pool before dinner. The pool deck was crowded with passengers soaking up the Caribbean sun. Sarah found a chair in a less crowded section and pulled out a paperback novel she had brought from home. She was wearing a simple one-piece swimsuit she had bought on sale. Nothing fancy, but she felt comfortable. She had been reading for about an hour when she heard familiar voices nearby. Patricia and her friends had claimed a set of premium lounge chairs closer to the bar, and their conversation was carrying across the deck. "Did you see that woman from breakfast on our dock this morning?" Patricia was saying, her voice loud enough for others to hear. "She was on one of those cheap group tours. I felt embarrassed for her." "Some people just don't understand that there are appropriate venues for different types of people," her friend Melissa replied. "This ship used to have much better screening processes." The third woman, Janet, lowered her voice slightly, but not enough. "I heard she won her cruise in some radio contest. Can you imagine? They're just giving away spots to anyone now." "No wonder the service has declined," Patricia continued. "When you mix different classes of people, standards inevitably fall. My husband paid $30,000 for our suite, and we have to share facilities with contest winners and budget travelers." Sarah felt a familiar knot forming in her stomach. She tried to focus on her book, but the words blurred as anger and humiliation washed over her. She had done nothing wrong. Nothing to deserve their contempt except exist in a space they felt was exclusively theirs. A young crew member approached Patricia's group with a tray of colorful drinks. "Complimentary cocktails for our VIP guests," he said with a practiced smile. Patricia waved him away dismissively. "We only drink top-shelf liquor. This looks like the house brand swill you probably serve to the regular passengers." The crew member's smile faltered. "These are premium drinks, madam. Same as we serve in the VIP lounge." "I doubt that," Melissa interjected. "Just bring us a bottle of Cristal champagne, and make sure it's properly chilled this time." Sarah watched the young man walk away, his shoulders slightly slumped. She recognized the look. It was the same expression she wore after particularly difficult customers at the diner made her feel small and worthless. That evening at dinner, the maitre d' again seated Sarah at the same table near the kitchen doors. The noise from the service area made conversation difficult, and she found herself eating alone while watching the animated conversations at the better tables. Halfway through her meal, Patricia and her group entered the dining room and were immediately escorted to a prime table by the windows. As they passed Sarah's table, Patricia paused dramatically. "Oh my," she said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "They really are seating everyone together now, aren't they? I suppose we'll have to speak to guest services about upgrading to the exclusive dining venues next time." Her friends laughed as they continued to their table, leaving Sarah sitting alone with her face burning with shame and anger. Around her, other diners had heard the comment and were now looking at her with curiosity or pity. For the first time since boarding, Sarah seriously considered hiding in her cabin for the rest of the cruise. The next morning brought the ship to Grand Cayman, and Sarah decided she wouldn't let Patricia and her friends ruin her vacation. She had paid for shore excursions with money she had saved for months, and she was going to enjoy them. This time she had booked a snorkeling trip to Stingray City, something she had dreamed about since seeing it on a travel show years ago. At the excursion meeting point, she was pleased to see Mrs. Patterson from yesterday's tour, along with several other passengers she recognized from the more affordable tour groups. There were also some families with children and a few couples who seemed excited about their adventure. "Sarah!" Mrs. Patterson called out with a warm smile. "How wonderful to see you again. Are you ready to swim with stingrays?" "I'm a little nervous," Sarah admitted. "I've never done anything like this before." "Neither have I," laughed a man standing nearby. He appeared to be in his early 60s with graying hair and kind eyes. "I'm Robert, by the way. My wife convinced me to try this, though she chickened out at the last minute and went shopping instead." As they boarded the catamaran for the trip to the sandbar, Sarah found herself chatting easily with Robert and Mrs. Patterson. Robert mentioned he was retired from government work, and Mrs. Patterson shared stories about her former students and her late husband. The boat ride was beautiful, with crystal clear water stretching in every direction. When they reached Stingray City, Sarah was amazed to see the shallow sandbar surrounded by dozens of stingrays gliding gracefully through the water. The guides explained how to interact safely with the gentle creatures, and soon everyone was in the water. Sarah was initially terrified when the first stingray approached her, but the guide helped her relax and showed her how to hold squid pieces for the rays to eat. Soon she was laughing with delight as the velvety creatures glided around her legs. She wished she had an underwater camera to capture the moment. "You're a natural," Robert said, swimming up beside her as a large stingray wrapped around his arm. "These guys seem to love you." "This is incredible," Sarah replied, her face glowing with happiness. "I can't believe I'm actually doing this." As they headed back to the ship, Robert mentioned that his wife was hosting a small cocktail party in their suite that evening. "We'd love to have you join us, Sarah. It's nothing fancy, just a few people we've met on the cruise." Sarah hesitated, thinking about her limited wardrobe. "That's very kind, but I don't think I have the right clothes for something like that." "Nonsense," Mrs. Patterson interjected. "Robert and Linda aren't pretentious people. Come as you are." That afternoon, Sarah spent time walking around the ship, feeling more confident after her successful excursion. In one of the art galleries, she encountered a crew member hanging new paintings. He was struggling with a heavy frame, and she instinctively stepped forward to help. "Thank you so much," he said gratefully. "I'm Marco from the Philippines. I work in guest services. I'm Sarah." That looked heavy. Very heavy. "You are very kind to help. Most passengers—" He trailed off diplomatically. "Some passengers can be difficult," Sarah said, understanding his meaning. Marco nodded. "You are different. I can tell. You treat people with respect." As they talked, Marco mentioned that he was studying hospitality management through correspondence courses, hoping to advance his career. Sarah found herself sharing her own story about working at the diner while taking night classes in business administration. "It is hard work, studying while working," Marco said, "but we do what we must to improve our lives." "Exactly," Sarah agreed. "My husband always said that education and hard work would take you anywhere you wanted to go." When she mentioned her husband had been in the military, Marco's expression changed. "Military? My brother serves in our Navy. Very honorable profession." That evening, Sarah made her way to Robert and Linda's suite, wearing her black dress again but feeling more confident than she had since boarding the ship. The suite was elegant but comfortable, with a small balcony overlooking the ocean. Linda turned out to be a warm, welcoming woman, who immediately put Sarah at ease. "Robert told me about your snorkeling adventure today. I'm so jealous I was too scared to try it." The other guests were an interesting mix: a retired doctor and his wife, a middle-aged couple who ran a small business in Iowa, and surprisingly, Jennifer and her new husband from yesterday's tour. Everyone was friendly and down-to-earth, sharing stories and laughing together. During the evening, the conversation turned to careers and life experiences. When someone asked Sarah what she did for work, she braced herself for the usual awkward moment. "I work at a diner in Phoenix," she said simply. "It's honest work, and it's helping me pay for business school." "That takes dedication," the doctor said admiringly. "Working and going to school is incredibly difficult. What kind of business degree are you pursuing?" As Sarah talked about her studies and her goals of maybe opening her own restaurant someday, she noticed that no one seemed to judge her or find her background inappropriate. Instead, they asked thoughtful questions and shared their own stories of working their way up in their careers. The conversation was interrupted by loud voices from the hallway outside. Through the partially open door, they could hear Patricia's unmistakable voice complaining to someone. "This is absolutely unacceptable," Patricia was saying. "We specifically requested that our suite be in a section with other VIP guests only. We cannot have our evening disrupted by inappropriate parties." A crew member's voice responded politely but firmly. "Ma'am, all guests have the right to use their assigned accommodations in common areas. The guests in 7210 are not violating any ship policies." "Policies need to be updated," Patricia continued loudly. "Some people simply do not understand appropriate behavior in luxury settings. The noise level is completely unacceptable." Linda looked embarrassed. "We haven't been loud at all. We're just having a quiet conversation." Robert walked to the door and closed it firmly. "Some people," he said with obvious annoyance, "seem to think they own the entire ship." The incident cast a brief shadow over the evening, but the group quickly returned to their conversation. As the party wound down, Mrs. Patterson walked with Sarah toward the elevators. "Don't let people like that woman get to you," she said gently. "I've been watching her since we boarded. She's the type who needs to put others down to feel important herself." "It's hard sometimes," Sarah admitted. "I know I don't belong in their world, but I'm not hurting anyone." "You belong anywhere you want to be," Mrs. Patterson said firmly. "And from what I've seen, you have more class and character than that woman could ever hope to have." As Sarah returned to her small cabin that night, she reflected on the evening. Despite Patricia's continued hostility, she had found genuine friends on this cruise. People who valued her for who she was, not what she owned or where she came from. She was beginning to realize that the problem wasn't with her. It was with people who couldn't see past their own prejudices and assumptions. Tomorrow would bring new experiences, and she was determined to make the most of them. The ship's fourth day brought them to Jamaica, and Sarah had planned to take a tour to Dunn's River Falls. She was looking forward to another adventure, but as she waited in line for the shuttle bus to shore, she overheard Patricia and her friends making plans that made her stomach drop. "I've decided we need to do something about that woman," Patricia was saying to Melissa and Janet. "She's clearly using this cruise to social climb, trying to insert herself into our circles. Did you see her at that party last night?" "Absolutely inappropriate," Melissa agreed. "Someone needs to put her in her place before she embarrasses herself further." Janet nodded enthusiastically. "I have an idea. The captain's cocktail party is tomorrow night. It's supposed to be for all passengers, but they usually recognize the VIP guests. What if we make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person she really is?" Sarah felt sick. She considered backing out of her shore excursion and hiding in her cabin, but Mrs. Patterson appeared beside her in line. "Good morning, dear," she said cheerfully. "Ready for another adventure?" Sarah forced a smile. "I hope so." During the bus ride to the falls, Sarah tried to focus on the beautiful Jamaican countryside, but she couldn't shake her anxiety about tomorrow night's event. The captain's cocktail party was one of the cruise highlights she had been looking forward to most. At Dunn's River Falls, however, her worries temporarily melted away. The natural limestone steps created by the waterfall were stunning, and climbing them with the group was exhilarating. The guides helped everyone navigate the slippery rocks, and there was a sense of camaraderie as passengers helped each other up the more challenging sections. Sarah found herself paired with a teenage boy whose parents were struggling with the climb. She helped encourage him when he got scared, and by the time they reached the top, he was grinning with pride. "Thank you so much," his mother said gratefully. "Kevin has been nervous about trying new things since his father deployed. You made this special for him." "My husband was military too," Sarah said gently. "Kevin should be proud of both his parents." As they shared a traditional Jamaican lunch at a local restaurant, Sarah learned that Kevin's family was on the cruise as part of a military family support program. They had saved for 2 years to afford the trip while his father was overseas. "It's hard sometimes," Kevin's mother Lisa confided. "People see us enjoying a vacation and assume we have money. They don't understand that this represents years of sacrifice and saving." Sarah understood completely. She knew what it was like to be judged for being somewhere people thought you couldn't afford to be. That afternoon, back on the ship, Sarah decided to spend some time reading by the pool again. She had been there for about an hour when Marco, the crew member she had helped in the art gallery, approached her. "Miss Sarah," he said quietly, "may I speak with you privately?" They walked to a quieter section of the deck, and Marco looked concerned. "I must tell you something, but please do not say it came from me. Some passengers have been asking questions about you." Sarah's heart sank. "What kind of questions?" "They wanted to know how you could afford to be on this cruise, what your background is, things like that. They seem to think you do not belong here." Marco looked angry. "It is not right. All passengers deserve respect." "What did you tell them?" "Nothing. It is not their business. But I wanted to warn you. Tomorrow night at the captain's party, I think they plan to cause trouble for you." Sarah thanked Marco for the warning, though it confirmed her worst fears. She spent the rest of the afternoon and evening in her cabin, trying to decide whether to attend the captain's party at all. The next morning she had breakfast early to avoid the crowds, but she ran into Robert in the elevator afterward. "Sarah, we haven't seen you since the other night. Linda was just saying we should invite you to join us for the captain's party this evening." Sarah hesitated. "I'm not sure I'll be attending." Robert looked puzzled. "It's one of the highlights of the cruise. Why would you miss it?" She couldn't bring herself to explain the situation, so she simply said she wasn't feeling well. Robert looked concerned and insisted she join them for lunch to get out of her cabin. At lunch, Linda immediately noticed Sarah's subdued mood. "What's wrong, sweetheart? You look like you've lost your best friend." Mrs. Patterson, who had joined them, studied Sarah's face carefully. "This is about that awful woman and her friends, isn't it?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and she found herself telling them about the overheard conversations and Marco's warning. Linda looked increasingly angry as Sarah spoke. "Absolutely not," Linda said firmly when Sarah finished. "You are not going to let those petty, small-minded women drive you into hiding." "Linda's right," Robert agreed. "You have every right to be at that party, and you have nothing to be ashamed of." Mrs. Patterson leaned forward. "Sarah, I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you. I've been watching those women since we boarded, and I've seen how they treat the crew, how they talk about other passengers. That kind of behavior says everything about their character and nothing about yours. But they're right about one thing," Sarah said quietly. "I don't belong in their world. I won this cruise in a contest. I work at a diner. I'm nobody special." "You listen to me," Linda said, her voice fierce. "I've met plenty of wealthy people in my life, and money doesn't make someone special. Character does. Kindness does. The way you helped that boy at the falls yesterday, the way you treat the crew with respect, the way you're working to better yourself. That's what makes someone worthy of respect." Robert nodded agreement. "Besides, you have just as much right to be here as anyone else. You won that cruise fair and square." That afternoon, Linda insisted on taking Sarah shopping in the ship's boutiques. "We're going to find you something stunning for tonight," she declared. Sarah protested about the expense, but Linda waved her off. "Consider it a loan if it makes you feel better. No woman should have to face down bullies without feeling confident." They found a simple but elegant navy blue dress that fit Sarah perfectly. It wasn't expensive by the boutique's standards, but it was more than Sarah had ever spent on clothing. Linda also insisted on lending Sarah a pair of pearl earrings. "These were my mother's," Linda said, as she helped Sarah put them on in her suite before the party. "She always said that real pearls could make any woman feel like royalty." As Sarah looked at herself in the mirror, she hardly recognized the confident woman looking back at her. The dress was flattering. The pearls added just the right touch of elegance, and more importantly, she felt supported by friends who believed in her. "Ready to show those women what real class looks like?" Linda asked with a smile. Sarah took a deep breath and nodded. She was still nervous about what Patricia might have planned, but she was no longer willing to hide from it. The captain's cocktail party was held in the ship's grandest ballroom, with crystal chandeliers casting warm light over elegantly dressed passengers. Sarah entered with Robert and Linda, feeling more confident than she had since boarding the ship. The navy dress fit perfectly, and Linda's pearl earrings caught the light beautifully. Captain Rodriguez, a distinguished man in his 50s with kind eyes and an impressive uniform, was greeting guests near the entrance. As they approached, Sarah noticed Patricia and her friends already positioned nearby, clearly waiting for something. "Captain Rodriguez," Robert said warmly as they reached him. "I'd like you to meet our friend Sarah Martinez." The captain smiled and extended his hand. "Wonderful to meet you, Miss Martinez. I hope you're enjoying your cruise." "Very much, thank you," Sarah replied. "It's been an incredible experience." Patricia stepped closer, inserting herself into the conversation with practiced skill. "Captain, I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I'm Patricia Whitmore Ashford. My husband Charles is the Ashford of Ashford Holdings." The captain politely acknowledged her, but Patricia wasn't finished. "Captain, I feel I must mention that we've had some concerns about the screening process for passengers on this sailing. Some individuals seem to be, shall we say, out of their element." She glanced pointedly at Sarah, who felt her cheeks begin to burn. Around them, other passengers were beginning to notice the conversation. "I'm afraid I don't understand your concern, Mrs. Whitmore Ashford," the captain said, his tone becoming cooler. "Well," Patricia continued loudly, "we've learned that some passengers are here through contests and giveaways rather than, shall we say, legitimate bookings. It creates an uncomfortable atmosphere for those of us who have paid full price for the luxury experience we were promised." The area around them had grown quiet as people stopped their conversations to listen. Sarah felt exposed and humiliated, but before she could retreat, Linda stepped forward. "Are you suggesting that contest winners are somehow less legitimate than other passengers?" Linda asked, her voice carrying clearly across the space. Patricia smiled coldly. I'm simply saying that there are certain standards one expects when paying premium prices. When you mix different classes of people, problems inevitably arise. Sarah felt tears threatening and was about to excuse herself when a new voice joined the conversation. That's an interesting perspective, Mrs. Whitmore Ashford. Everyone turned to see a woman in her 60s approaching their group. She was elegantly dressed but not ostentatiously so, and she carried herself with quiet authority. Sarah didn't recognize her, but she noticed several crew members straightening to attention as she passed. "I'm sorry," Patricia said, clearly trying to place the newcomer. "I don't believe we've met." "Admiral Elena Vasquez," the woman said simply, extending her hand. "United States Navy, retired." Patricia's expression flickered with uncertainty, but she pressed on. "Well, Admiral, surely you understand the importance of maintaining appropriate standards in exclusive venues." Admiral Vasquez smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I do indeed understand standards, Mrs. Whitmore Ashford. In my experience, the most important standards are those of character, integrity, and how one treats others." She turned to Sarah with a warm smile. "I don't believe we've been introduced." "Sarah Martinez," Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Martinez," the Admiral repeated thoughtfully. "Are you by any chance related to Sergeant Miguel Martinez, 82nd Airborne?" Sarah's eyes widened in shock. He was my husband. How did you—" "I presented him with the Bronze Star for his actions in Afghanistan," Admiral Vasquez said gently. "He saved the lives of 3 fellow soldiers and 2 Afghan civilians under heavy fire. He was an exceptional soldier and, from what I learned about him, an exceptional man." The space around them had grown completely silent. Sarah felt tears welling up, but this time they weren't from embarrassment. "He was," she whispered. "He was the best man I ever knew." Admiral Vasquez nodded. "He spoke about his wife often during his recovery. He was so proud of you for working and going to school, determined to build a good life together. He mentioned you worked at a diner to support his military career and your own education." Patricia's face had gone pale, and her friends were looking anywhere but at the conversation unfolding before them. The Admiral continued, her voice carrying to everyone in the immediate area. "Sergeant Martinez told me his wife had won a cruise in a radio contest, and he was excited for her to finally take a real vacation. He made me promise that if anything happened to him, I would make sure she went on that cruise and enjoyed every moment of it." Sarah was crying openly now, but she didn't care. "He never told me he talked to you about that." "He wanted it to be a surprise," Admiral Vasquez said softly. "He died 2 weeks before I could arrange the details. But I've been tracking that radio contest for 3 years, waiting for you to win." The crowd around them had grown larger, and Sarah could see people wiping their eyes. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. "Mrs. Martinez," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "it would be my honor to have you as my personal guest for the remainder of this cruise. I think your husband would want you to experience everything we have to offer." Robert cleared his throat. "Admiral, how exactly did you arrange for Sarah to win that contest?" Admiral Vasquez smiled. "Let's just say the Navy has some very talented communications specialists. We made sure she had multiple chances to be the right caller at the right time." Sarah stared at her in amazement. "You've been watching out for me for 3 years?" "Miguel asked me to," the Admiral said simply. "It was my honor to fulfill that promise." Patricia tried to slip away from the group, but Admiral Vasquez's voice stopped her. "Mrs. Whitmore Ashford, a moment, please." Patricia turned reluctantly, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I think you owe Mrs. Martinez an apology," the Admiral said quietly, but her words carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. I didn't realize," Patricia stammered. "You didn't realize what? That she was a human being deserving of respect? That she had earned her place here through sacrifice and loss? Or that your assumptions about people based on their appearance and economic status might be wrong?" The ballroom had grown so quiet that the Admiral's words seemed to echo. Patricia's friends had completely abandoned her, melting back into the crowd. "I apologize," Patricia said finally, her voice barely audible. "Not to me," Admiral Vasquez said firmly. "To Mrs. Martinez." Patricia turned to Sarah, her face burning with humiliation. I'm sorry. I was wrong to judge you." Sarah, still processing everything she had learned, simply nodded. She was beyond caring about Patricia's apology at this point. Captain Rodriguez raised his glass. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to propose a toast to Sergeant Miguel Martinez, United States Army, and to his widow, Mrs. Sarah Martinez, who honors his memory every day through her courage and dignity. The entire ballroom raised their glasses, and the toast echoed through the space. Sarah found herself surrounded by people offering their condolences, their respect, and their friendship. As the crowd began to disperse and conversations resumed, Admiral Vasquez took Sarah's arm gently. "Would you join me for a private conversation? There are things about your husband I think you'd like to know." Admiral Vasquez led Sarah to a quiet corner of the ship's library, away from the continuing festivities of the captain's party. They settled into comfortable chairs overlooking the moonlit ocean, and the Admiral ordered tea from a nearby service station. "I know this must be overwhelming," Admiral Vasquez said gently, "learning that your husband arranged all of this from beyond the grave." Sarah wiped her eyes with the tissue the Admiral offered. "I don't understand how he could have planned this. He never mentioned meeting you. Miguel was in the military hospital for 2 weeks before he died from his injuries," the Admiral explained. "I visited all the wounded soldiers during my tour of the facility. Most were focused on their own recovery, but Miguel was worried about you." The Admiral pulled out a small leather notebook from her purse. "He asked me to write down some things he wanted you to know in case he didn't make it home. Would you like to hear them?" Sarah nodded, unable to speak. "He said you were the strongest person he had ever known, that you worked double shifts at the diner without complaining so he could serve his country. He was proud that you were taking business classes at night, even when you were exhausted." The Admiral paused, consulting her notes. "He said you deserved to see the world, to experience beautiful things, but that you would never spend money on yourself while there were bills to pay." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she listened to words her husband had spoken years ago. "He made me promise 3 things, Admiral Vasquez continued. "First, that you would take that cruise and enjoy every moment without guilt. Second, that if anyone ever made you feel like you didn't belong somewhere, I would remind you that you belonged anywhere you had the courage to go. And third, that you would finish your business degree and follow your dreams." "I'm still working on that degree," Sarah said softly. "It's taking longer than we planned." Miguel knew it would be difficult. He also knew you would succeed because giving up wasn't in your nature. The Admiral smiled. "He told me about your dream of opening a small restaurant, somewhere that would serve good food to working families. He said you understood what people needed because you had been there yourself." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the waves roll past the ship. "Admiral," Sarah finally said, "what you did tonight, standing up for me like that, you didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Admiral Vasquez replied firmly. "Not just because I promised Miguel, but because it was the right thing to do. People like Mrs. Whitmore Ashford need to understand that worth isn't measured by bank accounts or social status." She was so embarrassed. Part of me almost felt sorry for her. The Admiral considered this. Embarrassment can be a powerful teacher if someone is willing to learn from it. Mrs. Whitmore Ashford had every opportunity to get to know you as a person instead of making assumptions. She chose to judge instead. The next morning, Sarah's last full day on the cruise, she found herself in an entirely different position than when she had boarded a week ago. Crew members who had barely acknowledged her before now greeted her warmly by name. Passengers who had overlooked her were now approaching to introduce themselves and share their own stories. At breakfast, the maitre d' personally escorted her to a prime table with ocean views. "Mrs. Martinez, it would be our honor to serve you at our best table this morning." Mrs. Patterson joined her, beaming with pride. "I heard what happened last night. I'm so sorry for your loss, but what a beautiful way to honor your husband's memory." Throughout the day, Sarah found herself in conversations with passengers she had never met before. Many shared their own stories of military service, of financial struggles, of times they had felt out of place or judged unfairly. She realized that beneath the surface of wealth and luxury, many people carried similar experiences and insecurities. Even Patricia approached her that afternoon by the pool, looking genuinely contrite. "Mrs. Martinez," she said hesitantly, "I wanted to apologize again for my behavior this week. I was wrong, and I'm ashamed of how I treated you." Sarah studied her for a moment. "Why did it matter so much to you that I was here?" Patricia looked uncomfortable. "Honestly, I suppose I felt threatened. My husband and we haven't always had money. I grew up in a trailer park, and I guess I thought if I acted superior to others, people wouldn't see where I came from." But why try to make me feel bad about my background when you understood what it was like? Because, Patricia said quietly, it's easier to push someone else down than to deal with your own insecurities. It was wrong and I'm sorry, Sarah nodded. Thank you for saying that. It takes courage to admit when we're wrong. That evening, Captain Rodriguez invited Sarah to dine at his private table, along with Admiral Vasquez, Robert, and Linda, and several other passengers she had befriended during the week. The conversation was warm and lively, filled with stories and laughter. Mrs. Martinez, the captain said as dessert was served, I hope this cruise has been everything your husband wanted it to be for you. Sarah looked around the table at the faces of people who had become friends, people who valued her for who she was rather than what she owned. It's been more than I ever imagined. Miguel would have loved seeing me here with all of you. Admiral Vasquez raised her glass. To new friendships and the courage to be ourselves wherever life takes us. As the cruise came to an end the next morning, Sarah stood at the rail watching the port of Miami grow larger as they approached. Marco, the crew member she had helped in the art gallery, approached her one final time. Miss Sarah, he said, I wanted to thank you for being kind to me when you had no reason to be. You showed me that there are good people in the world who judge others by their character, not their position. You're going to do wonderful things, Marco, Sarah replied. Don't let anyone make you feel small. As she disembarked, Sarah carried with her not just souvenirs and photos, but a renewed sense of her own worth. The woman who had boarded the ship feeling invisible and apologetic was leaving as someone who understood that she belonged wherever she chose to go. Admiral Vasquez walked with her to the terminal. Miguel would be so proud of you, she said. You faced down their prejudice with grace and dignity. I had help, Sarah replied, squeezing the Admiral's hand. From Miguel, from you, and from friends I never expected to find. 6 months later, Sarah graduated from business school with honors. She used the small inheritance from Miguel's military benefits combined with a loan to open Miguel's Kitchen, a small restaurant that served comfort food to working families at affordable prices. On the wall hung a photo from the cruise ship, showing her surrounded by friends at the captain's table, smiling with genuine happiness. The restaurant became known not just for its good food, but for the way Sarah treated every customer with respect and dignity, regardless of their background. She never forgot the lesson she learned on that cruise, that everyone deserves to be treated with kindness, and that true class comes from how we treat others, not from what we own. Admiral Vasquez visited the restaurant on its first anniversary, bringing a framed copy of Miguel's Bronze Star citation. He kept his promise to take care of you, she said. And you kept your promise to build the life he dreamed of for you both.